You're listening to an El Seminario production, a multi-generational, family-owned media company, capturing conversation that reflects our communities since 1989. Whether we answer your questions or inspire new ones, at El Seminario, we speak your language. Thanks for listening.
Welcome to We Speak Your Language, where real stories inspire real conversations. I'm your host, VII Reyes, and this is episode 7 of our Breaking the Ice series. Today we explore the rich tradition of Curanderismo, a holistic healing approach to wellness that has been practiced for generations. Joining us is a very special guest, Dr. Sofia Chavez, a certified doctor of natural medicine and curandera who brings over 25 years of experience. Sofia, we are so honored to have you here.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here. Thank you.
Let's start at the very beginning. For those who may not be familiar, how would you define curanderismo?
I would define Curanderismo as mind, body, spirit medicine. And there is a very strong component of the spirit in our world, in this modern world, especially in the United States. We think of psychology as the medicine for the mind. And we think of Western MDs or medical medicine as the medicine for the body. And oftentimes we say mind, body, spirit, but we don't really see a lot of that spiritual component in psychology work or in the medical profession. But in Curanderismo, it is the main piece of the work, recognizing that the creative forces, the cosmic forces, the universal forces connected to the individual's mind body is what helps people heal, what would help the world or humanity heal. And it's very nature-based. It's very, very nature-based. And it looks different. So you have different indigenous groups, if you will, and you have different traditional groups. So if you were talking to someone about curanderismo that was from Cuba, for example, it would look different from the curanderismo that I learned in the southwestern United States of New Mexico, and my family and friends from Mexico. So depending on where the individual comes from, whether it's Peru, Ecuador, Nicaragua, wherever it might be. So, but it has the same basic components of mind, body, and spirit.
That's really interesting, and I'm very excited for us to unpack a little more about that. How did you begin your journey? What led you to becoming a curandera?
Growing up in Albuquerque, my family are from small towns, Tijeras and Cubero, and I was exposed to curanderas as I was growing up. So my family worked with 3 curanderas, one from the small town of Cubero, which was really an elder woman, and then an African-American woman who was in Albuquerque, and then another Mexicana that was from the South Valley in Albuquerque. So, and then we always practiced curanderismo modalities, but we never really talked about it. It was just part of our daily practices. And then as you got older, you recognized, oh, this is part of what is referred to as curanderismo. But we never really, it was just part of the fabric of being in my family.
Mm-hmm. When you say you grew up with it, about how old were you?
When I was probably in middle school when my family recognized that that I had sensitivities. I could feel energies, I could see spirits, and my mom really worried about that. She worried that maybe there was something wrong. And so she would take me to a lot of curanderas, and that was probably one of the best things that could have happened for me, because now in my work that I do now, and I know we'll get into that a little bit later, but In the Western model, people who hear voices or see energies or feel energies are often labeled as mentally ill or with schizophrenic tendencies. And in the traditional world, it is seen as different. You recognize that you still have to learn how to work with it, but you're not disempowered. So at a very young age, I started to be exposed to curanderismo, the healing practices, the healing modalities, as well as the prayers and the rituals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that kind of does lead me to my next question. How you were kind of starting that conversation. Some people think traditional medicine and modern medicine are like worlds apart. How do you balance or integrate both in your work?
So my dissertation, when I was getting my doctorate, I wanted to focus on curanderismo. And so my dissertation is on using traditional Mexican curanderismo medicine, working with individuals who are diagnosed with bipolar disorder. And so I did a case study, and later on it was published in the Journal for Naturopathic Medicine. But I brought those pieces together using the curanderismo modalities of what people refer to as agua florida, or using essential oils. The Western model calls it essential oils. But like if you were to travel into rural United States or rural Mexico or some of these other places, they would break off a rama from a branch of a floral tree or a very aromatic tree. Y luego they're going to hit you with it, right? They're going to like be tapping you. And as they do that, the molecules from the plant go into the air. And when they go into the air, they go into your nose. And when they go into your nose, they travel to the emotional and memory part of your brain. Our elders, the curanderos, our ancestors knew that. And essential oil has only recently caught up with that, where the studies have shown that by using essential oils, it goes into the emotional and memory centers of the brain. So if someone has trauma or they have something that they're working through, but that was the purpose of Agua Florida. That was the purpose of getting a rama and, connecting with nature, understanding the potential, the healing power behind essential oil or agua florida. So when I did my dissertation, I took each one of those modalities. And so also in the Western model, I have a license in massage therapy. And in the curanderismo model, that's sobadas and body work, tapping, maybe a curandera is tapping on your forehead or tapping on your head. And in this Western model, they call that somatic therapy. Well, so the Western model has taken the indigenous model after all these years and has realized, okay, there's a lot of value here. And they've given it new names in the Western model, but really they're ancestral teachings of sobadas and body work. So, and then sound. Sound is another thing that now science is supporting. Antes they would say, oh, that's, it's just anecdotal, it's just fluff. But when our ancestors would sing and drum and rattle or blow the tecocoli, the shell, they knew that it was affecting the body. They knew it because they had already connected to God and to the cosmic forces, and they already had the answers. And so now we have in the Western model what they refer to as music therapy. Okay, so all of these new and cutting edge therapies are really based off of ancestral models. And so when I'm working with doctors, I work with doctors out of Anschutz, out of other universities and other medical or clinical settings. And now the science is there, which is really sad for some of our previous elders because the science wasn't there and they weren't really given the credit for all their knowledge and wisdom that they brought forth. So that has been a really big part of my work, is making that bridge between ancestral medicine and modern medicine. And now we have the science that supports it.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't mean that all those doctors are going to support it. I do have a lot of medical doctors that support it, but a lot of them still see it as not scientific enough, if you will.
Mm-hmm. Before we get into that, I kind of want to go back a little into like, how our you said older generations. You mentioned them and how they were familiar with a lot of this work, you know. Um, Many of us grew up with our grandmothers crafting remedies, performing egg cleanses, herbal baths, and offering prayers. Much of what you have already mentioned. Are you seeing younger generations embracing and reconnecting with this ancestral knowledge?
Yes, yes. In our Kalpuli, they're referred to as really a Kalpuli is a group, and it can be a danza group. It can be like a sweat lodge group that they always their medicine is sweat lodge. It could be a sacred plant like mushrooms or peyote, but a Kalpuli is a group that works together, and you see more and more young people at the university level who are saying, I want to learn about my ancestral medicine. And so you have a lot more young people getting involved. Some want to, like maybe they're going into the world of social work and they want to include curanderismo in their social work. They want to include curanderismo in their nursing. And so, we refer to it as culturally based care because sometimes when people hear the word curanderismo, Hollywood has really done us a disservice. They've made it very dark and have taken away the beauty and the science from it. And so, yes, I definitely see like this movement towards the inclusion of curanderismo with our young people. Yes.
That's exciting, and that's honestly good to know. It makes me envision like intergeneration, like it's an intergeneration and multi-generational bonding
Yes.
moment and keeping that ancestral chain. Just because I feel like we've distanced ourselves so much from it, and it's good to hear from you that there's still that connectionness amongst us. um, as you mentioned earlier, curanderismo views health as interconnected with the mind, body, spirits, and including the environment. You kind of touched base on this, but can you elaborate on how does mental health fit into this holistic approach?
Yeah. So mental health is a major component in curanderismo. And um, I don't know that we've been given historically underserved people of color who practice their nature-based medicines, whether you're Latino or from Africa or other parts of the world with traditional medicine. But the traditional medicine is, it is something that we need to recognize that mental health is such an important component. Right now, we're in a mental health crisis, right? That's what we've been talking about for many years now, especially since COVID, post-COVID. And with curanderismo, we were talking about somatic therapy earlier. So I remember curanderas like tapping on your third eye and saying prayers and like reinforcing that Jesus walks with you, whatever your particular religion was. But for me, I was raised going into a Catholic church. We would go to a Catholic mass and then we would come outside, put on our traditional clothing. And so we'd have our regalia on, and then we would dance with Our Lady of Guadalupe in the courtyard, and then we would carry her up the mountain. And so that mental health piece has really been on focusing on your strengths, if you will. And so I'll give you a couple of examples. We were working with one group, and they were re-entry people who were leaving jail and prison. And so they were coming in, they were receiving services. And one of the phrases that we would use is, in this moment, my thoughts are peaceful. Like really helping people break those anxiety thoughts that just kind of run away with you, or those depression thoughts. And one of these men who really couldn't afford to get in trouble, he had shared with us that there was a fight that had broken out in the bus. And he said he could hear, because I usually work with a team of curanderos, and I like working with people who want to be students who are then going to take the medicine out. And he said, I could hear you all in my head saying, in this moment, my thoughts are peaceful. So he was able to take what we offer in those healing sessions and apply it to everyday life. And then I've had other individuals who maybe they've been brought to us and they've been, I'll give you an example of an individual who had not left her house for many years. And her neighbor brought her to the group. And her neighbor drove her, like literally brought her. And after several months of coming and just hearing these oraciones, these mantras, these positive affirmations, and really focusing on individual strengths, her neighbor could no longer bring her. And she actually like sent me a text and said, I'm going to drive myself. I haven't driven in years, but I'm going to drive. So make sure I get there. Like she was really afraid of driving and getting there. And so since then, like her world's opened up, right? Like now she's driving, and she's not just driving like to our sessions. She drives around to the stores and, you know, the mercados around her house. And so it's huge. The mental health component for healing, for helping young mothers who are struggling, single moms, all of this. I mean, I could give you examples for so many different situations. And that's what mental health is all about. It's about letting go of the anxiety and the depression and the fear, whatever is controlling your life, so that you can live a more rich, fulfilling life for yourself and your family.
Mm-hmm.
So it's more like a natural process, if you will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The stories you just mentioned right now kind of made me curious on, like, what does an initial assessment or evaluation typically involve or look like? Like, I imagine it varies, how you mentioned. It depends on the person's needs, right? But
Right.
ideally, what does like an assessment from a curandera look like?
So now you're getting into like a whole other area right now, because I am an NLC, which is a non-licensed counselor or a registered psychotherapist for the state of Colorado. But I do not promote myself or offer my services as a psychologist. Okay. And typically mental health is offered by a psychologist. And so a psychologist is going to do an evaluation, and a psychologist's notes are going to be different than most of the curanderas that are out there. Okay. And so it helps to have the education. Most of the individuals who are assisting me, the professionals that are assisting me in my environment, are either psychologists, social workers, or someone who has been trained in the areas of mental health, but I don't do an evaluation. Okay, so I don't offer one-on-one treatments like that, or one-on-one sessions. And you know, you can get into really sticky situations, our community can, because in this Western model, you're not allowed to diagnose and you're not allowed to treat. Okay, those are two words that like they really caution you, that you're not allowed to diagnose, you're not allowed to treat. So someone can come to you, like for example, I have had psychiatrists and psychotherapists refer their patients to me for because they feel like what we offer would support the individual in the areas of mental health. So when they come in, everything is done in a group session, and everything is done in a plática, guided meditation with all of the different modalities of sound, aromatherapy. Maybe there's acupuncture, maybe there's semillas in the ear, but we allow people just with the dynamic of positive affirmation and positive words and stopping those cycles of negative thoughts. So I don't do an evaluation.
Oh, okay.
That's not something that I do. In my past, I may have done that when I was offering like occupational therapy or working more along the linear line or the Western model. I have had people who have been referred to me who are teenagers, and they've been diagnosed with the early stages of schizophrenia. And then we have plática conversations, and we have this group dynamic. And within that circle, we are discussing how to differentiate the levels of consciousness and talking about consciousness so that you can recognize the differences between realities. And I'll give you an example for myself. When I was a younger woman, I was sitting at a restaurant in Albuquerque, and it was a Mexican food restaurant, and it was just this big open space, and I thought that some birds had come into the restaurant, and so I was doing this, like trying to keep my head away because I could see the birds flying around, and then I realized nobody else was doing that. Okay, so as I was working with my curanderas, with the elders who were working with me, one of the things that they taught me is pay attention to your environment. Is anybody else doing that? Because if they're not, then sit still and ground yourself and pay attention to where your consciousness is at. Learn how to differentiate. And so I've had individuals, and I have worked with their psychiatrists who have come to see me and have said to me, maybe they've been diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and they have psychosis and hallucinations. And they say to me, I am so overly medicated. Like I feel like a zombie, like I can't even feel the world around me. And I'd really like to cut back on my meds. And so then I will reach out to their psychiatrist, and most of the time they're willing to work with you and to say, hey, what can we work on together? What skills can I teach this person that are within the curanderismo realm, and work with you so that we can safely decrease this person's medication. And so it's not really clear, and it's not really standard. It's very individualized. But I think that mental health, it really comes back to our, most of the time when I'm working with people with physical conditions, like maybe fibromyalgia, chronic pain of certain types, there's usually an emotional component. And usually the emotional component is connected to mental health, right? So it's all interrelated.
That's something I was also interested right now. Yeah, you mentioned most of it has been like mental health and mental illness. Does it also involve like physical like treatment? You mentioned I think chronic illness también.
Mm-hmm. So it depends on what the situation is. Like I have a license in massage, and so I don't do. Years ago, that was one of my big focus, was doing a lot of sobadas and moving out a lot of the emotional pain out of the muscles through a clinical type of massage. But I don't do that type of work anymore after doing it for 20 some years. My hands, my back, it's just different now at the age of 67. I just don't, I don't do that work. I find that most of the body work that I do is either like a raspada. And again, there are clinical studies that a raspada is when you are stimulating the meridians on the back, like the acupuncture body. And people will release, like there was one lady who had asthma from the time that she was 3, for example. And along the back, you have lung points. And so we were working with the lung points, stimulating those lung points and giving her remedios and doing the treatments. And then within 8 months, it was the first time in her life that she had ever like had her asthma resolved. So there are a lot of modalities that can take place just with some of the basic modalities that are focusing on the major points of the body.
Okay. I love all the stories you've shared with us so far. I'm wondering if there's if you don't have to, but I'm wondering if you could share a healing story that left a deep impression on you.
So many years ago, I was offering someone a treatment, and I do use a lot of indigenous Reiki. And really, the word Reiki, again, is more of a modern word in the modern world. So Ushui Reiki, or the individual who brought Ushui Reiki into this world, had a mystical experience, got the Reiki symbols, received them from the sacred forces, and then he introduced them to the world. But all cultures have used posición de manos. Okay, so that is a form of Reiki. Taking your hands and placing them on somebody is a form of bringing in that sacred energy and influencing the energy body, mind, body, spirit of another person. And so I had my hands on this person's shoulders, and she was on the massage table, and I was saying my prayers. And when I do my work, I always call in Father, Mother, God, Jesus, the angels. So even that, curanderos have different anchors, if you will, or different energies that they might work with. Maybe somebody only works with Our Lady of Guadalupe. You just, so everyone is different.
Mhm.
And so I had my hands on this person's shoulders, and I was doing my work. And in my mind, I do a lot of fishing. I have been fishing since I was younger. And in my mind, I felt a fish, like a little stalker fish. And I felt it in her, like in her abdomen area. And I remember thinking, is that a fish I feel? And within a moment, it swam up her body from her stomach and into my hand. And when I lifted my hand, the skin on my hand was about an inch high, and it was moving like jello. And I got really scared because that had never happened before. So I always have my circle around me, Jesus, the holy ones, because the other really important thing to recognize in this interview is that what's important is to communicate what God wants communicated to you. Does that make sense? And
Yeah.
it's the same with a healing session. What does this person need? You don't need to decide, oh, she's a single mom and she's struggling. Oh, this is a person with cancer and they need to be healed. You need to back yourself out of it, and you need to ask God, the cosmos, the holy ones, what does this person need? And I'm just here, just like the electrical cord. Okay, I'm just here just to be here to be that conduit. And when that happened, I saw the holy ones around me, and I kind of threw it up in the air, at them, and said, oh my God, because I had never had that experience before. And then I called my maestra at the time. She has since passed away, but I worked with Maestra Elena Avila, who was a curandera out of Albuquerque, well recognized. And she said to me, how long have I been telling you to use an egg? And so at that time, I was doing a lot of occupational therapy work, working in rehab and more in a Western model.
Mhm.
And it's not really allowed, okay, to use an egg, to take an egg into your treatments or to take an egg. So, but stones are. And so a lot of people will use obsidian, they might use turquoise, and that are absorbent like an egg. They can lift off the energy similar to what a chicken egg can do, or the egg. And so that was one of the experiences that was very profound for me. And then another one was, I was working with the curandero in Mexico, and he was talking about levantando la sombra. And I thought, I'm not sure I've ever experienced levantando la sombra. And that year, I was working at elementary school, and the wind came. And when the wind came, it turned over little planes in Jefferson County, and it did a lot of damage. But the wind picked me up, and a little kid. So he had forgotten his lunch, and we had walked back to the barracks. We went back to the barracks to get his lunch. And when we were coming back, the wind picked up, and his little body, he must have been 6 or 7. And he was blowing in the wind, and I couldn't get my feet on the ground. And the wind just took us. And then when the wind blew him away from me, he got caught on a fence. And then I went to reach for him, and that's when the wind stopped. And when it dropped me, it literally tore my muscle from my bone, from my arm. And so I had this big susto. I'm sure the little boy did too. And so the curandero that I was working with at the time, the maestro that I was working with, said, now you have to go back and levantar la sombra. And I thought, okay, so what does that mean, levantando la sombra? And he said, you need to go back, and you need to get your coat or whatever clothes you were wearing, and you need to drag it on the floor, and you need to say these prayers, because when that happened to you, you had susto and you had soul loss. Okay, so you know when you hear about people having soul retrievals and soul loss and susto, so I went and I did that. And even that, in when you're trying to live in a traditional way in the modern world, here I am in a schoolyard. There's teachers, there's kids, and I'm trying to drag my coat and do a ceremony without really being noticed by everyone in the schoolyard. And when I did that, I saw the big shadow come up out of the ground. So I was able to see, oh, so that's why, like, when people have rollover accidents or they fall off a horse or they have these major sustos, that's what that means, levantando la sombra. And, this is the type of like education and knowledge that we need to work with our younger generations so that that isn't lost, so that people understand, what does it mean, levantando la sombra? There's so many things that can be lost because it's not practiced or heard about anymore.
Yeah, you touched on something really powerful that you were starting to mention it in the beginning, but with this being said, how do you respond to, más bien, what stigmas or challenges have you encountered as a curandera? But most importantly, how do you respond to skepticism or resistance?
So I have experienced plenty of that over the years. Once I was doing a presentation for CU, and there was a group of young women, and they, as soon as I walked in, they were like snickering and laughing. And then I went up and I started my presentation, and they were quite rude. Like I would say, I was sharing, and they were like, "Oh yeah, really," And so I, after that, and even then, I got words in my head that said to me, say to them, I'm not here to convince you, and I'm not here to convert you. I'm here to share with you the way that I see the world. I was asked to come and do this presentation, and that's why I'm here. And so that's really all I can say, because if, and I've dealt with that, but I think that over the years, you see less and less of that, because now, science is finally catching up to our ancestors. Our ancestors were way ahead of science. And so now people can understand mind, body, spirit medicine in a whole new way. But it still happens. I've had people say to me, like when I make my altar and I have my feathers and I have my angels and I have my obsidian and I have all my tools, my herramientas, and people will say, what does Jesus have to do with this? And they get really offended. Like, you have a picture of Jesus here. And I grew up, it's almost like being, you can be a biracial person, or you can be a mixed blood mestizo person, and you have your indigenous roots and your Spanish roots, or whatever your mix is, right? Whatever you are. And it's the same with the way that I was raised with religion. I don't separate Jesus from nature. I don't separate that piece. And that's really hard for some people to wrap their head around.
Yeah, especially that many people think that things are just one way, or there's only one way, the right way. There's no space to be open-minded
Yes.
for a lot of people. What guidance would you offer to someone who feels drawn to ancestral healing practices but isn't sure how to start their journey?
So I think one of the best places that people can go to is the University of New Mexico in Albuquerque has been offering a class. It's the summer Curanderismo class. It is called a Curanderismo class, Medicine Without Borders. And it happens every June. And so they bring these professors, bring well-recognized curanderos and curanderas and healers from around the world, but especially from Central and South America. And they talk about all the things that we're talking about here. And they have examples and they have workshops. And that allows people to be exposed to a group of different healers, because you're not going to connect to every healer. You're going to connect to someone who feels comfortable to your personality and to your belief systems. And I think that that is one of the most beautiful places that people can go. And it's actually like suggested or recommended. Like if you find someone in this space, in this sacred space that you connect to, reach out to them, connect with them, and you know, start to find your path if that's something that you want to do. So I to me that's one of the safest places because it's not like sometimes you'll see stuff that's posted, but in that particular environment, you really get to sit back and watch it. You're in the anthropology building and you're being exposed to all of this education and all of these different healers and different healing modalities, and you really get to make an informed decision about, oh, I liked the way that woman's energy felt, or I really liked the way that man worked with feathers, or you know, like whatever it is that calls you. So that's one of my suggestions there. Yeah.
Okay. Is there anything else you would like to leave our listeners with?
No, I just think that it excites me, and I'm happy that you invited me here because this is such a beautiful bringing back nature. I think will help people recognize that our planet is alive, that the hierbas are alive. You know, I give presentations for people who are learning how to be pharmacists and you know, giving out prescriptions. And so I teach community how to recognize hierbas and how the hierbas are going to work with their blood pressure medicine or their heart medicine or whatever it is. But then recognizing that you can have a medicine cabinet in your kitchen. You can have a part in your kitchen that works for digestive, circulatory, the central nervous system, or stress. You know, there's just so much that our ancestors and our abuelitas used to do and used to have available, and it's still there.
Mm-hmm.
It's still available to us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
A veces we won't see it until nos toca, until it's our turn.
Yes.
We're gonna learn somehow.
Yes.
Um, Before we wrap up, Sophia, where can listeners find you or learn more about your work?
So I no longer have like a private practice where I do one-on-one sessions. Now I find that I'm more effective or can help more people when I'm doing group work. And so I work out of Sun Valley, and it's the Sun Valley Kitchen Community Center, and it's the Sun Valley Community Center and Wellness Center. We opened the Wellness Center 2 years ago, and it's become very popular. And you know, we have one-on-one sessions. Like, let's say, for example, somebody has a frozen shoulder, or somebody has something specific that they need help with. So that's the best place. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for that, Sophia. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and knowledge. I've learned so much with our little chat today. So
Good.
thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for that. It's been an absolute honor having you with us. Thank you to Caring for Denver for making this project a reality. And thank you to everyone who is listening. This conversation continues with you. Let's keep breaking the ice together. Please take care of yourselves and look after one another. I am your host, Vivian Reyes. Until next time.